Good afternoon. My name is Tom Maher, and I am the State Director of Minnesota MUFON. On behalf of Erica Lukes, the Minnesota MUFON Board of Directors, our Assistant State Director Craig Lang, our Chief Investigator Bill McNeff, and all of our field investigators, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to our presentation today, coming to you live from New Brighton, Minnesota, on Saturday, August 12th, 2017. Our presenter today is Erica Lukes, and she will be speaking on Unraveling Utah UFO Mysteries. Erica is a former Utah MUFON State Director, artist, singer, and talk show personality. She provides insight to Utah's high strangeness, discussing well-documented cases and locations with long histories of UFO activity. With a background in classical voice, Erica has been singing professionally for over 20 years. Jazz, world, rock, musical theater, and blues. She's been featured on several recordings for various artists. Erica writes and records her own music. She studied at the University of Utah Concert Chorale and is a master Pilates trainer from the Physical Mind Institute. Erica's passion for the subject of unidentified flying objects dates back to her early childhood. After a series of personal UFO sightings in 2013, however, she felt compelled to find out what was taking place in her home state of Utah. She decided to take an active role in the UFO subject and, as a result, joined MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Such are Erica's skills in the field of ufology, she quickly went from being a MUFON field investigator to the Utah State Director for MUFON. She soon took on the role of associate producer for the MUFON communications team. Erica also worked as part of the MUFON Experiencer research team. Erica's efforts led her to being officially recognized at the 2014 and 2015 MUFON Symposium for her work with MUFON headquarters. As her busy schedule increased, Erica chose to resign her post as the MUFON State Director. Today, she is head of Unexplained Utah, an organization which is focused on scientifically researching UAP, otherwise known as Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. Erica works with other UFO-based organizations too, and on a global level no less. She is driven to not only broaden public awareness of UAP, but also to develop research tools that can be utilized by other organizations to streamline the research process. Erica strongly believes it is imperative that UFO organizations work together to share information. Minnesota MUFON, it is time to take a step outside of our borders and take a little trip down to Utah. Please help me welcome Erica Lukes.
Thank you. That's awesome. Well, I am absolutely thrilled to be here with all of you today. This is an honor to meet all of you, and I hope that I have the opportunity to talk with you and find out personally why you're here, and chances are it's because of the same reason that I'm here, because I experienced something that was so profound, and I looked to try to find answers, and I couldn't find any. And I found a group of people, not only in Utah, but all over the world, who have the same goals and have the same passion and want to understand what we're dealing with. And I will tell you that, to me, this has become my mantra. Right now, this is something that we need to take into consideration. And if you don't know Rear Admiral Delmer Farney, he was a member of NICAP, and he states these words: "Unidentified flying objects are entering our atmosphere at very high speeds, and they are obviously under intelligent control. We must solve this riddle without delay." So this was decades ago. And the question I have to ask each and every one of you is, what progress have we made? Have we come closer to learning the truth, or have we become splintered, and are we moving away from good research, from a cohesiveness that will help us expand our knowledge base? I think that I'll answer that question for you. I think that we are right now in a very tenuous time. I believe that there is a lot of disinformation being given in our field right now, and I believe that is because we are this close to finding out a truth, the truth that is absolutely undeniable. We say this was out at Area 51, if any of you have ever been out there. I know that you were just out there, but I want to believe, this is something that I want to believe. Actually, I don't want to believe because I know. And I want all of you to leave here knowing that in your heart, in every essence of your being, that this is not a belief system. This is a fact. There is something intelligent engaging with us. And if anybody ever tries to argue with you, you say, I want you to go look at the work of Barry Greenwood, who is the world's most important archivist, who has declassified documents like you would not believe. You look at those documents and you tell me that there is not something going on. You look at the work, which I will be talking about, of Professor Erling Strand and his team from Hessdahlen, Norway, 30 years of data, and you tell me that there is nothing going on. This is real. It is not a belief system, and it is up to each and every one of us to figure out how we are going to address this and move forward before the powers that be make that choice and we get forced into something that won't be for the best interest of all of us. I want to tell you a little bit about my life, which is a way that I don't typically start my lectures, but I was an only child, and you can see, and I've heard that my mom kind of looks like me. I look like my mom. I was raised, she was a single mom. She got divorced when I was a year old. And interestingly enough, I spent the first year of my life living at Dugway Proving Ground. If you don't know what Dugway is, and that might explain a lot, I will tell you all about that because, in my opinion, it is one of the most frightening places on the planet, and you all need to know about it. My grandmother and my mother were incredibly crucial for lots of reasons. They instilled in me a sense of being involved with my community, of taking personal accountability. And when something isn't right, to get out there and to speak up no matter what you have to deal with so you get to the truth. My mother and grandmother were both very politically active, and my grandmother was the first person to start the community councils in Utah, which was very important for our community. It's wonderful. My mom is spicy, and so genetically, you can tell where I get that from. Those of you who, Craig, you might know that. But I'm very happy that I grew up with strong women who understood the sense of self and the sense of taking accountability and making a change in the environment. I grew up and I've had, I had some very interesting experiences as a child. But in my 20s, I moved into a haunted house. And let me tell you, that was never a dull moment. And my Halloween parties were off the hook because we got our night vision and we were, looking for orbs. We had such a great time. Excuse me. I just get so excited. But in that experience, I was there for 8 years. And whatever was there and it was interacting with us, it exposed me to new ideas. And I learned a lot from studying the paranormal end of things. I learned how to use EMF detectors. I learned how to use night vision. I read a lot. I learned a lot. And I will say today that a lot of the things that you find with paranormal research cross over into what we're dealing with here in the UFO topic. And on a little side note, I think that we need to stop separating all of this because it very well could all be connected and we're missing important things. My haunted house was crazy. We had a couple different things going on. We captured a lot of EVPs. There was an older woman there. We have an EVP of her singing. There were many different times when my guests would experience apparitions. They would see apparitions and a lot of different things. I felt very sad to leave that house, and I really truly believe that whatever was there on that property was very benevolent and watching over us. It was a very interesting thing for me, but that was one of the things that sparked my interest in the abnormal, the paranormal, the UFOs. This is my certificate of appreciation for MUFON. I just wanted to show that to you. I was very proud when I became state director and I worked for MUFON headquarters to have Jan Harzan invite me on stage at the 2014 and 15 symposiums to express gratitude. That meant a lot to me because I believe in all of you and I believe that there is such an important message. And I believe that the good men and women of MUFON are trying very hard to get this out there. And so to be recognized, that really meant a lot to me. This is me and then Merrill Cook, who is a congressman from Utah, and this is our Utah MUFON meeting. When I took over MUFON Utah, it was the chapter was pretty much non-existent. We had a really wonderful, and I wish I could have met her, another spicy woman from Utah, imagine that. Elaine Douglas was the state director. And Elaine was a groundbreaker. She did a lot with abduction research. And she ended up leaving MUFON with quite the bang. And she also, she left behind a lot of good research, and I wish that I had access to that. Some of it is available online, but I cannot get to some of it, which makes work in Utah a little bit more difficult than I think it needs to be. So hopefully that will change. But we had a great cohesive group of people. Merrill Cook is a lifelong family friend of mine. And he speaks he was at Contact in the Desert a couple years ago, and very important. And it's also important to have relationships like this where you have people that are in politics that can help me get access to things, and it's a good thing. I bet you guys have connections like that too. So I am in my adventures, and I've had quite a few of them. I have met people from all over the world, and each of these people has provided me with a tool, something to learn. Last year, I went over to England, and did any of you hear about the anti-crop circle formation? This was really interesting. I love England, but I contacted the fellow who was with me. His name is Gary King. And he's a world-renowned crop circle researcher, and he's also been on Ancient Aliens. So just throwing that out there for you. Yeah, he's amazing. But I contacted him, and I said, hey, I'm going to be over there, and I want you to show me the ropes. And a couple days before I went over to England, the anti-crop circle formation appeared. This crop circle was incredibly interesting because there was a huge controversy that took place about it. And Gary King and Michael Glickman were on one side of this, thinking it was not man-made. And then you have Colin Andrews and Linda Howe, who kind of thought that it was man-made by the circle makers. Having been there and walked into this location, which is right on a family farm, and having talked with the people that were there at the farm, and knowing a little bit of the background, I would say that this was something that was perhaps not man-made. And to me, when I had this experience of going there, it also highlighted to me the fact that people could come up with a definitive answer without actually having stepped foot in a circle. And I think that this is very commonplace for what's taking place in our field. We sit behind computer screens. We get our information on Facebook, and we believe what people who are in authority in this field tell us, and that is wrong. And I will tell you that when I first came into this field, the people I held in high regard are not the same people that I hold in high regard now. So again, the anti-crop circle really showed me that you can take a family, a good working family that had this farm, and destroy their reputation, and do that without really doing research. And I think that's just something we need to be very cognizant of. I also met with my friend who has been on my radio show, Tunde Antarase, who is a world-renowned remote viewer. And we had just a fascinating conversation, and he is training me in remote viewing, which I think will be very exciting. So I go to all these cool places. I meet these wonderful people, and I try to share this information with all of you so we can learn. But we're going to not talk about that. So right now, what I'm doing, this is really cool, and I don't know if you guys watch Destination America, but I'm in a new TV show, and this is my expressive gesture. But it's called UFOs, The Lost Evidence. Richard Dolan, Nick Pope, John Greenwald, the good old gang are all in the show, and I believe it's some of the same producers as Ancient Aliens. And it's well done, and we're seeing some fresh faces, which is the seventh sign of the apocalypse, and it's a beautiful thing. We need fresh faces. So hopefully you'll watch that. They're replaying the episodes, and we're going into shoot season 2 coming up in October. I was a singer. I have not done that for a long time, but I love that. And it's interesting to me, being a creative person, to study ufology and to see how many creative people have experiences. So I wonder, and I know Grant Cameron has done considerable work on that, and you're lucky enough to have him here, but talking about musicians and their sightings reports, and are we wired differently? Can we pick up things? I think these are all important questions, and sometimes I think because I have this artistic ability and maybe not too much ability to balance a checkbook, that that there's something here that I can get that other people can't. I don't know. It's curious, and we need to study it. I have a radio show, and it's called UFO Classified. I do it every Friday night, and I have brought on some of the best researchers in the world, and they're people that you probably haven't heard of, and they're people you need to know about. People, I'm sure you've heard of Fran Ridge, who is with NICAP. He hasn't done a radio interview in eons. Neither has Barry Greenwood, who is incredibly important for historical preservation and archiving. And then also Greg Long, who I will talk a little bit about because he did a significant body of work and wrote a book about the Yakima Indian Reservation, which is a window area or hotspot, and we have many of those around the world. So in Utah, as I make my merry way around to all the different events and meet different people, I do this because I meet people like this. This was the Utah UFO Festival, and I sat and talked to these two gentlemen who both live in very remote areas. Both of them have had incredible sightings, and had I not gotten out there and made myself available or put them at ease, I never would have been able to hear their experiences. And these are important, and they're profound. And so just as much as I'm researching this, I also feel like I need to be a support system, as most of you who do this feel we need to be as well, because sometimes these sightings are so frightening and so out of the norm that people need to know that they're okay, they're not crazy, that this is something that is real, and we have a cohesive community that will work together to try to figure it out and support each other. I own Total Body Pilates, which we were mentioning, so I've been a business owner for 20 years. I love it. It's fun. I get to help people, and that makes me really happy. I've got great clients. This is my Pilates studio, so it's kind of cool. I just redid it, so you just have to admire for one second. It's very awesome. But it's also challenging to be a mother and a business owner and a UFO researcher. I'm just throwing that out there, but I'm having a good time, so whatever. I had to throw this in here because this is the dorkiest picture on the planet, and this is Zach Bagans, but we were at a paranormal thing. They were shooting Ghost Adventures, and the first thing that came to my mind is, can I see whose biceps are bigger? So I had a little biceps off with him, and clearly I won. I don't know what to say about that, but this is my car. And I just wanted to throw this in there because I go out and around, and I'm in another episode, and I do a lot of investigating in my cute little 65 Ford Galaxy convertible. So I just wanted to share that with you. Those are little bits and pieces of me, and it's fun. I love life. So this is me singing at the 2002 Olympics, Lin Ki Tai. I've got so many slides, and as we know, I love PowerPoint. There's the Pilates studio. And then there we are filming an episode out by Dugway Proving Ground, which we are going to talk about next, the radio show. I'm buzzing through these because we had a little issue I had an issue with the PowerPoint. Hey, so now we're going to get to Utah. Utah is, without a doubt, one of the most beautiful places on the planet. How many of you have been there? Yes. Okay, cool. That's so awesome. The scenery is unlike anything you will ever see. It is beautiful, the desert, the mountains, and we have the best snow on earth, which is really the truth. I love it, except it costs way too much to go skiing these days, so I would rather buy night vision gear. That's the way I roll. We also have a really quite a unique geography. We have a lot of natural resources, and so I've been, taking different maps of energy resources, of the gravitational anomalies, and then also uranium, the uranium maps, which are really curious. So when you're seeing, sightings clusters, you see sightings up here to this part, which is Dugway, and then you've got over here is the Uinta Basin and home of Skinwalker Ranch. So it's very curious, and I like to take all of these maps with my research partner, Jeff Cox, and then kind of layer them and see what the commonalities are. And I think there are some very interesting commonalities. Of course, in Utah, we have the church, in case you didn't know that, the LDS Church. And so that creates a very interesting dynamic. I have also found as a researcher, it's important to go back and look at all the history of the Mormon Church, of the settlers, of the Native Americans. All of these things help build a portfolio, so to speak. And then you can look at all of this, and instead of just looking at a sighting, you look at the bigger picture, which I think is very imperative to what we're doing. There is no separation of church and state, and we have a lot of military in Utah. We have the Utah Test and Training Range, which is tens of thousands of acres. And let me tell you, they test some very unique things out there. Dugway Proving Ground, Hill Air Force Base, and then also the NSA. So did you know that the NSA just opened up shop in Utah? So all of these things are, very close, and it's quite curious. This is out at Bluffdale, and this is not too far away from Dugway, but this is a huge installation. It cost, obviously, millions upon millions of dollars to put that installation there. But we have a lot going on in Utah. And I think the interesting thing is we have such a kind population of people. They don't ask questions. And I think we need to, because there are a lot of things going on that are very alarming. We also have a lot of aerospace industry in Utah. And they use Dugway Proving Grounds to test a lot of their newfangled weapons. Orbital ATK is there, just to name one. We've got Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Zodiac Aerospace, and this is just a fraction of what we have there. We also have Raytheon, and I love this. They're testing, energy, or they're testing weapons that I think are quite alarming, and I think we've seen through some of the things that have happened at Dugway how they're using some of these things to the warfare, to really the electromagnetic warfare, to do things. And I think that some of their tests are kind of moving off course, but you'll see in a video in a moment all about that. We've had interesting sightings, and this is really super cool. I brought this magazine so you can look at this. This is 1969. And the fellow that wrote this he became so enamored with this topic, and his dog, this little bulldog, they were out in a remote area. He photographed some very interesting things, and his dog eventually died of radiation poisoning a couple days later. So I've been collecting everything I can on Utah, including old newsletters, periodicals. I have a subscription to the newspaper archives, so I go through and cut things and put them in a binder and then pull them out when I need to, but really amazing cases. We also had some interesting Blue Book cases, which we will be talking a little bit about, and this one from 1962 that took place and was a multi-state thing, really caught the eye of George Knapp and Barry Greenwood, and they've got quite extensive communications back and forth. It's a good case, and I will be posting that on my website, ufoclassified.com, so you can look at some of these historical archives. And here we are to Dugway. So I hope if you retain anything from me talking, it is this, because like I said, this is the most frightening place, in my opinion, on the planet. And I live 80 miles away. Salt Lake is the most densely populated city in Utah, and we're 80 miles away from a place that ships live anthrax via FedEx. This happened a little over a year ago, but it's quite unique, and it's also unique because of the UFO sightings that are around Dugway Proving Ground. I have had the fortune of meeting with a lot of different witnesses, and one in particular, this was the daughter of a helicopter pilot who was stationed out at Dugway. So this is secondhand information, but they were doing drills out there, and there were several helicopters getting ready to take off. Their communications went haywire, and through the night vision goggles, they were able to see these spherical objects that were hovering in place as if to say hello, and these objects would blink on and off. They were all quite alarmed because this was nothing that they knew was being tested there, but these type of sightings happen. I have a friend, Dave Rosenfeld, which we're going to see in a moment, who spends a significant amount of time on the periphery of Dugway, and he has seen some pretty fantastic things. So there is a lot to this. The animal deaths, this was Skull Valley, which was back in the 60s. That was a year before, well, I'm not even going to say it, because then I'll date myself, and that would be bad. But it was very disturbing. This took place not on the boundary of Dugway. I mean, this was on the outside of Dugway, and then we had a massive bird die-off on the periphery of Dugway as well a few years ago. So all of these things, and here's Dave overlooking Dugway, and then we are going to play a video that will give you a little bit more information. So here it is on Dugway.
The Chemical Corps Proving Ground at Dugway, Utah, provides the space and facilities needed for the field testing of agents, munitions, and delivery systems. Recently, a series of hard target tests was conducted to determine how effectively field fortifications could be penetrated by the highly lethal nerve agent GB Hessdahlen when delivered by. The guinea pig is the next to react and succumb. It should be remembered that less of the GB agent is required to kill man than to kill this guinea pig.
Just one of those things, it's failure after failure after failure. And here they are out there with at least 30 military contractors out there at any given moment doing whatever they want, meaning no congressional oversight, no independent oversight. They do whatever they want out there. Now, I've seen some of this testing. It's godlike.
She'll say that there was never really any risk to the public, but many are wondering how the military managed to send live anthrax spores to at least one lab and possibly several others.
I couldn't tell you how many stories have come my way from Dugway employees or Dugway contractors. All night, people were kicking back in their cars instead of being out. And then we see what looks like a giant arc welder off in the distance out on the Dugway property, just, and then a beam of light. And we're all like, hey, see this? Wow, that's crazy. And about 15 minutes later, that arc welder type thing goes off again, and this time shoots up, and as it's sitting there, all of a sudden, these blue lights come down, completely surrounding this beam. Almost as if they're watching this test. Okay, beam of light goes off, blue lights are gone. We're all just going, oh my God, I hope we got that on camera. I hope my film's picking this up. I was 35 millimeter, we had digital, we had everything rolling at the time. So then I start downloading the pictures, and we get the 35 millimeter film developed, and it comes back with green lines in it. My 35 millimeter pictures, Don's 35 millimeter pictures, and all of our video. All the 8 millimeter Handycam stuff, all had these green lines going through. So I take my film back and I says, go to the processor. I said, what would cause this? And so 2 or 3 people came in and said, well, this is not processing. It would have to be that your film was exposed to radiation or x-rays. And that's when we really started worrying about our health, going, gosh, were we too close to this test? Because we all felt sick afterwards. We get these green lines in our film, in our video, and we smell this ozone and this weird fog is rolling through.
So I have to ask you, I mean, you were outside of the boundaries of Dugway, right?
Yeah.
So that means that whatever was happening to you affected you outside of the boundaries, and that is a huge problem.
Yeah, and that's when we contacted the Dugway Watchdog Group and the news authorities and all that, and said, you know, people need to know what's going on here.
All right, we have some new information just into our newsroom tonight about the lockdown at the Dugway Proving Ground. We told you earlier.
People in American Fork and Highland reported some strange happenings in last night's sky.
They did, and they want to know what was hovering over that area between 7:15 and 7:30 last night. ABC
something as they hung low over the sky.
I don't believe in extraterrestrials.
Lynette Chittister doesn't believe in close encounters. Neither does Mike Galbraith.
And when people tell me this, I think, oh, you know, you're just seeing things or people are making things up.
But last night, both saw something in the sky that they can't explain. Mike was in the Air Force and says the lights hovering in the sky were unlike any he had seen. He was outside a shopping center in American Fork, grabbed his cell phone, and took this video.
But I looked up and there was 3 red lights, and then they started dropping. It looked like flares or something bright was dropping straight down.
Lynette saw it too at her home in Highland.
And I notice over the roof of the garage a red light and a white light. And the red light isn't flashing, that like an airplane light does. That's what drew my attention to it.
She says soon there were 3.
And out of the red light comes like a firework, the phosphorescent silver. It's coming down out of it, and I thought, okay, I've never seen that before.
Both say the objects were flying slowly, almost hovering, and were in formation.
And they looked like they were flying in formation perfectly together. And then whatever was dropping looked like it was burning real bright.
But Galbraith says the lights were without sound and did not belong to any plane or helicopter he was familiar with from his military experience. And he says what was being dropped were not flares.
They usually shoot out of the sides or they shoot down, and there's a lot of them. And you could definitely hear them.
Lynette's husband once manufactured military flares. He agreed what was being seen was not a military exercise. But what was it?
So there's Dugway. In a nutshell, there are lots of things that take place in and around this area. And in my opinion, when you look at the work of Robert Hastings, who has done significant research on UFOs and nuclear installations, it's the same thing. Whatever this is appears to be monitoring installations that are of critical importance. And so here you have Dugway, you have the outer lying areas, the towns, Tooele, Magna, all of these places that the people, the residents, have had decades-long worth of sightings. They've had interactions, and this is something that, because they're such small towns, that it's hard to get people to open up and share, but when they do, it is pretty staggering. I want to just give a little side note here. When you look at that last video, I met with Ben Hansen. I was speaking at a conference with him in Texas, and he had mentioned that somebody had sent him something claiming to have been responsible for what those people saw. And I would love to know who that person is. I would like to talk to them. I know personally, I've done a lot of research, and that what was seen is this isn't the first time that this has been seen. One of the witness testimony is the critical piece is they were moving in formation, which if it was a flare or it was a balloon with something burning off of it, they wouldn't be doing. So sometimes when people give these, oh yeah, that was me, I was just doing a hoax, like in Phoenix, Arizona, you know, when you had the Phoenix lights, it was the same type of thing. You see a couple people come out of the woodwork to try to explain this, and then you have to ask yourself, wait a minute, why are you doing this? Who are you? What is your motivation? So yes, there are things that are mundane that can be explained, but when you look at stuff like this and you see the parallels to other sightings all over the world, you see an orange-amber sphere that appears to be ejecting things, then you need to look further and you need to ask questions. And when somebody steps up to try to debunk it, you need to say, not so fast. We got a little more digging to do. So Dave is a good friend of mine, and he is also on that TV show. We do lots together, and he's going to be in a clip coming up pretty quickly. But I want to give you a good historical perspective of Utah, because it is a state that we haven't gotten a lot of coverage for things other than Skinwalker Ranch, which is really exciting. We're going to talk about that. But Project Blue Book, there were a few cases back in the late 50s, 60s that were pretty pivotal, and I think that some of you here who are really well versed in all of this would know about this. So we have the Delbert Newhouse footage. He was traveling through Tremont in Utah, and during this time he and his wife and children observed some spherical objects, and I wish I had the video to play for you. I don't, but it is readily available on YouTube. He was a photographer, Navy photographer, and he got out of the car and videotaped or filmed these objects, these white spherical objects. There were several of them, and they were moving with a very deliberate purpose. The Newhouse footage is interesting because this was scrutinized. There was over 1,000 hours of analysis done by the powers that be. And although there were a couple little mentions that they might have been birds or something else, the general overall sentiment from the people that analyzed this footage was that this was anomalous. And so this is important. And I will say, this case, if you look at the footage, this is exactly what we're seeing now. And so, again, we've got to look at the history, look at the fact that these objects are being seen all over the world, that this is nothing new, and we need to figure out why they're appearing in certain areas, how we're going to get field research done, how we're going to share data, and figure this out. So another really amazing Project Blue Book case that I had this was so exciting. So Barry Greenwood obviously is very near and dear to my heart. He is an archivist, and I always call him up and say, hey, Barry, I need you to send me everything you can get on Utah. And he does. He is a love. He has spent his whole life archiving, collecting resources from people that have passed away, researchers, or people that want to donate their archives. He restores them, scans them, and is putting them online so future generations will have this information and they can build from the research that has already been done. This is incredibly important. But I contacted him, and he gave me a little blue book ditty, and this was very cool. He had sitting, and he's got these boxes of old cassette tapes, and he had some cassette tapes with regard to the Waldo Harris case. The Waldo Harris case took place on October 2nd, 1961, and he was a pilot who was taking off from the Salt Lake Valley. There were several ground witnesses, including Jay Galbraith and his wife, who were the owners and operators of the airport in this area, which is now closed. And they all observed these objects. It's an incredible case, but Barry took the audio tapes, which only a few people had heard, and he burned them for me. And so I actually have the actual interviews conducted, and it's very cool. I'm going to play one of those for you. So here you see the Utah Central Airport, and then down here is Provo Omni. You got over here to the left, again, Dugway Proving Ground. Up there is Salt Lake International Airport. And the interesting thing to me, and a reason that I like to give you specific cases like this, is a lot of these sightings are taking place historically, decade after decade, in the same areas. So what makes these areas unique? And this area, as we will see in a case that I will be telling you about in a little bit, is the same area, almost the same trajectory of a case I worked on in 2014. Same type of thing. So what is it? This is a flight path for the Salt Lake International Airport. And from what I understand, the people there and the people at Hill Air Force Base understand that there is something going on. So it would be very nice to have a little chat with them, but of course they don't return phone calls. So this case was incredible because of the fact that you had this pilot who was seeing things. You had ground observers. They were all intrigued, and they were not people that were expecting to have a UFO sighting, so this was very out of their element. Here is a drawing by one of the witnesses, and I will have, again, all of these papers available for you to look at on UFOclassified.com. And then Professor McDonald, David McDonald, actually did a lot, not David, yes, okay, I'm totally flustered because my PowerPoint's special, but he did, James McDonald, thank you for having my back. James McDonald, who was a professor in Arizona, did significant studies with regard to this, and he actually has a video interview with Waldo Harris, or excuse me, an audio interview, and you can find that online. I wish I could have played that for you. It's really important, but he did some great work, and also in this audio interview told Waldo Harris, you know, the people, the powers that be are saying that this was explainable. And you could, when listening to Waldo Harris's voice, it was just kind of the shock and disbelief that something so extraordinary could be explained away like it usually is. Again, I will have all of these archives available for you to see, and here is a report from Waldo Harris. It explains his sightings. He was in a small plane. He took off and then saw this disc-like object and began to pursue it. Let's listen to, really quickly, we're going to listen to one of the audio recordings, and this is a treat. So, hope you enjoy it.
Would you give me your name and address, sir?
My name is Jay Galbraith. Address, my home address, 1564 South 6th East.
In Salt Lake?
Salt Lake City, Utah.
What was your occupation?
I'm an operator of Utah Central Airport.
And how long have you been in this business?
I've been in this business a couple of years at this location.
How long have you been a pilot?
Oh, 20 years.
And about how much flying time do you have?
Oh, probably close to 2,000 hours.
Fine. Did you notice any definite shape to this object?
No, I wasn't able to see a definite shape.
What did it appear to you like?
I could see this object with my naked eye, the glow of it, and through the binoculars I could see that it was just a bright, shiny object.
Could you compare it in size with any known object, baseball or pea or anything?
Oh, I'd say it was much bigger than that. I'd say it was up in 25 feet in diameter or something like that.
I mean, at the distance, what would you compare the size with?
Oh, basketball, probably.
Could you determine any color?
The color would be, without the light shining on it, would appear to be gray. The shiny part would be a flame color, bright, brilliant flame color.
Was there anything you'd associate with a manned aircraft, such as vapor trail, exhaust, or tail section, wing section?
No, sir, nothing that way.
Was there any sound at this time?
No, sir.
What would you estimate the altitude and the distance?
I'd estimate the altitude at about, at the lower part of it, around 15,000 feet, and it extended on up maybe 20,000.
That was a different time zone.
Yes.
Moved up. And could you estimate the distance?
The distance from here would, my estimation would be 15 to 20 miles.
You listen to all of that, but I have about 40 minutes of recording, including the interview with Waldo Harris. And again, I will say that these people were just average, hardworking people that had it with Jay Galbraith and Waldo Harris and a couple of the other witnesses had aviation experience, and so they were trained observers, and this makes them, as we all know, a much more credible witness according to some people. But this was unique and important, and I will say that it's important, again, I'm going to stress the fact that this took place in the flight path for an international airport. So a lot of times you'll see, especially in Utah, a lot of the sightings are taking place in the flight path, which presents a very clear and present danger with regard to aviation safety. And that is something that when I began researching in Utah and I had my own personal sightings, to me that was top on the list. We need to understand what's taking place. We need to understand the fact that these do take place in the flight corridors for international airports. And so I think it's important to not rule out things without giving a proper investigation. You know, sometimes these are not airplane lights. Sometimes these objects are not Chinese lanterns. And so investigating means looking at all of the possible possibilities and ruling out, or either determining it's mundane or ruling that out. I think that's important. So this case was, we also have Robert Grommer and some of the other witnesses that were there that gave their testimony. It was interesting because there were, Waldo Harris had asked for somebody to scramble, Hill Air Force Base to scramble jets to see if there was something in the area because he was concerned about this. They did that and they could not find anything, but they did investigate. So very curious. And then there's the Salt Lake Tribune article, and you can see Waldo Harris down there at the bottom, and the owner and operator, Jay, and his wife, Galbraith, of the airport. He was in a Mooney Mark 7, and then I also want to go back because I want to play just a little bit of Waldo Harris talking about his sighting. This is really good.
Would you give her your name and address, sir?
My name is Waldo J. Harris. I live at 631 Garfield Avenue, Salt Lake City.
And what was your occupation?
Real estate broker.
What type of a pilot's license do you have?
Single engine land.
And about how many hours do you have?
Oh, approximately 600.
With regard to this unidentified object, when did you first sight it?
Just as I was making my takeoff run on Utah Central Airport.
And when the best observation you had, would you describe the shape of this object?
Well, it appeared to be circular or elliptical in shape. As it seemed to rock up to one side, it looked to be a perfect circle. It was still 3 to 5 miles away from me at the closest point, so I couldn't swear that it was circular, but at least it was in that shape at least.
Would this be full circular, or would it be a disc shape?
Well, it was a disc shape. It wasn't like a balloon. It was more like a saucer.
Right.
A little thicker in the center and thinner toward the edges.
What would you estimate the size, the length?
Well, I would say somewhere between 35 and 50 feet. I would say it was about half again as wide as the wingspan on the Mooney. And what is the wingspan on the Mooney?
35 feet.
35 feet, and then it'd be a good 50 feet across.
Right, and how thick?
Well, I would guess about 4 feet.
Oh,
maybe a little thicker than that in the center, but not much more than that.
With regard to the color, how would you describe that?
A gray. Of course, now I was looking toward the bright part of the sky in the south, and it was, I would say, a light gray when there was no sun reflected on it, and then when the sun reflected, it was bright like a mirror.
All day long, and it's really curious, and it's funny how, I mean, they were just very methodical, and at the end of one of the interviews, I believe it was with Clyde Card, who was at the airport, you know, he basically just said, see if I ever report a UFO sighting again, and then they all chuckled, and it was quite funny, but they were methodically interviewed, and it was It's an interesting case, not only because of just the uniqueness of this, but also because when you, again, look at the cases I've been investigating now, you see these patterns that are taking place. And that is quite important. So here you have Utah Central Airport. It is no longer there, unfortunately, but it is quite interesting. Here you've got a photo, and in this photo, and this is interesting, it mentions Mount Nebo. In a case that I'm going to be talking about in a moment, Mount Nebo will come into play as well. So this is, again, a very active area. There's the runway and a picture of the airport, which is great. I love these old historical photos. So now we're going to get to a case that I talk about a lot because I believe that the gravity of this type of case cannot be understated. This is a case that I was involved with, that I actually submitted to the CMS when I was state director for Utah. I got a phone call from Fox 13 News, and it was in the middle of an afternoon, I believe it was Thursday, and the reporter said, "Hey, Erica, we are getting reports. We're getting inundated with phone calls. We've got people, posting on social media. We've got these objects, these spherical, whitish metallic objects that are hovering over Salt Lake Valley, and there are hundreds of witnesses observing these. They want to know what it is." And so I, went into the MUFON CMS and noticed that, well, there weren't any reports yet. Maybe people were too busy, or maybe they were just thinking that if they posted it to social media, that would be a good enough record, which unfortunately it's better than nothing, but we still need reports, so it's important. I did, through social media, I got in there and then I looked at the person that was posting, and I contacted them, and I was able to get information and then get reports put into the CMS, and then get people involved that I needed to get involved. I knew that this sighting was too important. The next day, these objects were observed in Breckenridge and all over Colorado. And a really amazing reporter over there had the foresight to get in there, to call NORAD, to call the police department. The police over there saw these objects. And when I reached out to the police officers in Utah, they were a little bit kind of on the down low. They didn't want to talk about it, but they did over in Colorado, which was awesome. I knew it was imperative with a mass sighting, a mass daylight sighting, that I get in there and request radar data immediately. So I contacted Bill Puckett, who is from UFOs Northwest. He is, I have the utmost respect for him. He's worked with me on other cases. He's one of the best radar analysis experts in the world. And so I submitted a FOIA request with his help, and also Robert Powell, who was with MUFON, and I have a lot of respect for him as well. But we submitted that, and not once but twice we received data back, and the data was unreadable, in unreadable text format. Was that perhaps somebody that was new on the job, or was this a case of trying to hide important information? We don't know. But when I started to interview witnesses, and I went out into the field, and I interviewed a group of people that lived in an apartment complex. They were all out there, and they said that it was very unusual because they saw these spherical objects hovering there for upwards of 45 minutes. We know that weather balloons aren't capable of that. They don't hang in one place and then move off methodically. They also noticed that there was an absence of sound in the environment, which again was very curious. Their apartment complex was in the flight path for the Salt Lake International Airport, and they noted as well that there was a lack of the normal aircraft traffic, which was again quite curious. They said that there was a military presence, that there were military craft in the area, and one witness said that they appeared to be monitoring these objects from a distance. Flash forward to Colorado, you have a witness, and I believe that this case was in the CMS, from my recollection, but this witness said that there was a military jet that was in pursuit of one of these objects. Now, you know, of course, it's incredibly hard to disprove or prove any of these cases because it's witness testimony. But when you look at the gravity and the combination of all the witnesses' reports and the fact that you've got pictures all over the internet, you have a really great case, except for the radar data, which was a huge bummer. But I also, you know, I reached out to MUFON Colorado, and there's some amazing people. Ken St. John, who is absolutely doing a brilliant job with education, and I think that's wonderful for MUFON. But I reached out and said, hey, you know, what are you guys thinking as you're seeing these reports come in? And I spoke with a fellow there who mentioned, and we both talked about this, the lack of transponder data. And so that was curious to me. It was thrown around a bit that these objects were actually Google Loon balloons. And I don't know where that came from. But obviously Google Loon balloons, that couldn't be the case for a multitude of reasons. Number one, they don't launch Google Loon balloons in flight corridors for international airports. Is that a shocker? No, it's called aviation safety. They also weren't launching that many of them. And after my talk with the FAA, I found out that, guess what? They weren't launching in Northern America, so they are not Google Loon balloons. There was also no transponder data, and that made it a very important case. So I'm going to play this video so you can see what they did in Colorado. This is very cool.
3 very mysterious shiny lights over Breckenridge have police and residents puzzled. Just before noon today, law enforcement agencies started getting reports of UFOs. 9 News Mountain Newsroom reporter Matt Renew is joining us from Breckenridge. And Matt, many people saw these objects today, including yourself.
You bet, Mark. It has been the talk of the town around Breckenridge all day. Even if now here at 5 o'clock, I'm about the only person willing to get in front of a camera and talk about the UFOs that were flying overhead. There was 3 white dots, I'll show you, that were flying over a Breckenridge behind me late this morning. Looked as if they were hovering right over Baldy Mountain behind me. And while no one from the Breckenridge Police Department or Sheriff's Departments wanted to talk about the objects on camera, several people at those organizations saw them, and others around town reported the strange things flying over the skies of Breckenridge, sending police out to investigate these shiny, white, tiny dots in the sky. Some people off camera said they saw them form triangles and a line. On our camera, it seemed as if they didn't move at all. In fact, it took some help for most people to even see them.
The very top of the trees, and then just go to the left in the blue sky. There's all those kind of wispy clouds. Yeah. There's a white dot right in near the edge of those wispy clouds.
Just to the left of the second pine tree, there's a white dot. The FAA didn't have a comment on what these dots could be, nor had said they're not tracking any abnormalities at this time. But yesterday, a TV station in Utah reported very similar white dots appearing in the sky over Utah. The objects were visible for about 3 hours. They showed up best when the sun was reflecting off of them. Mark, we also called the Strategic Command as well, U.S. Strategic Command. They said they aren't tracking anything, but they typically track those objects that come in from outer space and then enter orbit. They believe whatever these were probably below their range of tracking.
And not drones, you don't think, Matt?
I don't think they were drones, and the folks that I talked to said they didn't look like weather balloons because at times they would just sit there for 5 or 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes without moving an inch on our view screen in the camera, and then you would see a flash of light and they would take off across the edge of the mountain ridge behind me. So it didn't appear to be drones, it didn't appear to be weather balloons, truly unidentified flying objects in the skies over Breckenridge today.
All right, Matt Renew, if you should suddenly disappear, we have a clue. Matt Renew reporting live from Summit County.
There's always got to be a little cheeky comment in there like that, doesn't that? But great reporting. And this is something that, to me, again, this is a case that isn't an isolated incident. If you look at some of the case reports in CMS, or you look on the internet, even though a lot of things are hoaxed, yes, we know that, but if you dig, you're going to find instances where the same types of objects are seen. Why? I don't understand, and this is one of my passions, as Craig knows, because we talk about this a lot, but we have a tendency to look for the one case that is going to prove or disprove the fact that this is happening. We rest our laurels on Rendlesham or Roswell or some of these, the Phoenix Lights, and yes, they are great and important cases, but they took place decades ago. And we need to focus on what the overall picture is of this. What is the data telling us? It's not about one case. It's about the data. It's about acknowledging the fact that this is commonplace in the world of sightings, that we often get these white, metallic, spherical objects during the day. They behave unlike weather balloons or any other types of mundane objects, but they also, in the evening, we're seeing reports of the amber spheres repeatedly. And this isn't just decade after decade, this is hundreds of years, if not thousands, when you look back at some of the indigenous peoples who were in these locations reporting the same types of things. So the patterns are there. What are we doing with them? I don't know, because I'm pretty sure that most of us aren't doing enough. That's what I think. So here are some photos, again, that circulated on social media. And you can see these objects. So they were quite curious. I have another friend who actually videotaped these a couple years after that, and the video has been analyzed, and he's the biggest skeptic on the planet and was pretty blown away seeing these things in Salt Lake City. So again, I did the FOIA request, which when you do a FOIA request, they cost money. So each of us as an investigator is responsible for spending our money to get data. And oftentimes, depending on how much time it takes for the FAA to get the data, it can be quite costly. But again, we have, very similar to the slide I showed you with the Waldo Harris case. Here you go. You've got the same type of trajectory for the objects that are appearing. So right over the Salt Lake Valley, right over Provo, and then the next day they're in Colorado. So quite curious. In another case, and then this was, here's the explanation for the October 61 case, and then you've got it again for this case. They're weather balloons. They're Google Loon balloons. No, they're not. I will say that, and I believe that, and I know that with every ounce of my being. No, they're not. But finally, when I investigated this case, and I'm going to talk about this case, another big one with radar and audio data, I will talk about that after the break, but we again, when I got this American Airlines pilot case, and I reached out to Bill Puckett to obtain a FOIA request for radar data, I said, Bill, we're working with different people now. Let's just humor me, and let's try to read the data off that old case again. And so he sent it to Martin Schaaf, I believe, overseas, and he was able to pull off enough data to substantiate the fact that, yes, there was an unusual amount of military aircraft, F-16s, in the area at the time of the sighting. So that validated what the witnesses on the ground were saying. The military, there was a heavy presence there. When I joined MUFON and I was trying to learn from people, it shocked me, honestly, to hear people say, nope, we're not going to go there. This has nothing to do with UFOs. And I thought, what? How do you know? Show me your work. Let's look at your research. Let's look at your, it's so ridiculous. But I understand, when you're dealing with the science, which, is debatable in some other circles, especially in the United States. We're not quite good at that yet. But I believe, you look at Hessdahlen and you look at the fact that these are hardcore scientists, and they had to make a very deliberate decision. How much do we look at? They needed to narrow their focus in to the anomalous light phenomena so it could be given to the scientific community in a broader sense, and then they could have a little foothold. And so there, I believe that there were other things taking place in Hessdahlen, just like in Yakima and Skinwalker Ranch, that are paranormal, but they could only go so far. But for all of us, people who are not scientists, let's go for it. But anyway, I'm going to take a break, and thank you. It's really wonderful to be here.
Please re-welcome to the stage Erica Lukes.
Well, thank you. You are also warm and wonderful, and I am impressed at the community that you've created here. And I hope I get to go visit Paisley Park. That's all I'm saying. I don't have that much time, but I love Prince, and it's very cool that he lived here. But there's so much information that I have to share with you, and I love obviously making videos and sharing videos and all of these things, but I know that Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Basin is curious, and I will tell you, I have been there many times, and it is one of those places that you go and the whole vibe, I mean, it's just that whole area, it's palpable. And for whatever reason, you know, the Uinta Basin, and it's not just the Skinwalker Ranch, but the whole Uinta Basin has a history of very unusual occurrences. And I think that this is not unlike other places in the world. And I want to say that I think that we need to really look at the fact that perhaps Skinwalker Ranch, not only is it unusual, but perhaps not so different from other places, but the thing that makes it really unique is the fact that there is a person by the name of Junior Hicks, and he has over 700 reports that he's collected over the past few decades, and that's why I think that Skinwalker Ranch, one of the reasons Skinwalker Ranch has been so important and has gotten out there in the public. But the whole area has a unique, kind of a rough and tumble history. So here, thanks to the Uinta County Library, I have an old photo of the gilsonite miners who would mine. And that, again, this area, especially near Skinwalker Ranch, it has a very specific kind of mineral and rare earth content, which a lot of hotbeds or window areas around the world do as well. We have a lot of really interesting and tumultuous history with the Mormons and the Native Americans who, Brigham Young came through town and came through the state and decided that, he wanted certain areas. And one of the areas that he didn't want was this area in the Uinta Basin. Shocking. And so you have the array oil fields there, and you've got a lot of really interesting Ute history and Navajo history. It's complex, it is intriguing, but there was always kind of an element in this area of, we had a lot of miners, you had a lot of kind of living on the edge type of lifestyle. So there was, it's been an interesting area. And then you throw in all of the wonderful petroglyphs in the area, and there are petroglyphs that are at the McConkey Ranch, which is not too far from Skinwalker Ranch. Those are curious, and if you're driving through this area, you can go see them. Ron Regehr, who was the Utah State Director and is a friend of mine and a colleague and very active in MUFON, Arizona now, has done a lot of research with regard to petroglyphs, and there are some interesting things in 9 Mile Canyon that he talks about, and he feels that they are kind of the guardians protecting from skinwalkers. But the skinwalkers, I mean, all of you have heard about skinwalkers, right? Oh, Lord have mercy. Okay. Well, let me tell you, the skinwalker is a Native American and Navajo belief, oral tradition. They're a witch. And it's a person that derives power from negativity, from death, dismemberment, from any sort of behavior, human behavior that is not necessarily good. And the skinwalker gets his power by either killing somebody or doing something very despicable. They have the ability to shapeshift. So oftentimes in areas, and it's not just at Skinwalker Ranch, we've got reports of these shape-shifting creatures all over the world, which is curious when you start looking at some of these window areas, and they have, some reports have them, this tall, slender man with hollowed out eyes and long stringy hair. Then you have these skinwalkers kind of morphing into some bipedal creature or a wolf or some sort of animal. And it really is curious, but I will tell you what, I have talked to more people that have had really intense, profound experiences with whatever these entities are, that I can't tell you that this is a fantasy. I believe that there are reasons why indigenous peoples pass on these myths, legends, and I believe it's because there's something very profound going on. So up in the Uinta Basin, you've got reports of skinwalkers. The Uinta Basin, particularly Skinwalker Ranch, has a reputation as being a place where there is a lot of negativity. And I believe that there are places in the world that have maybe a little bit more positive energy and places that have a very dark and disturbing energy. Do I think that everything that goes on up there is bad? I probably don't, but it is interesting to me when you start to talk to the people that live in that area, when you look at maybe the crime statistics, when you look at the health statistics, when you take all of this, and there's a lot to take into consideration. I believe that when you're in a location that has such recurrent types of phenomena, I believe that if we really put some good effort into this and studied it, we would find that there are detrimental effects on mental and physical health. And I believe that needs to really be looked at. So it's, again, one of those things. We need funding, we need resources, we need people like you to help us do all of this. The Utah UFO display was a groundbreaking book, and on the screen you see two people who I will always just feel a kinship with and a deep appreciation for. Junior Hicks, who I was mentioning, was a science teacher up in the Uinta Basin, and he began to receive reports, and the police department became comfortable with him, and he wanted to investigate, and this was back in the 60s. So he began talking to people and collecting reports about really unusual UFO sightings, strange creatures, you name it. He has reports on those, and this database right here, 700 reports. Can you imagine one individual doing that? I think it is so important. And just think if each of us did that in our own area, what a contribution we'd all make. Then we've got Dr. Frank Salisbury, who was a botanist, and he passed away a little over a year ago, which was a great loss. I had the pleasure of speaking with him on a couple of occasions, and he wrote this book, both of them together, which is the Utah UFO display. This is kind of the precursor for Hunt for the Skinwalker, another really great book, and I bet some of you have read that. But these two men had very devout belief in God, in the Mormon Church. And so when you experience this high strangeness and you have such a devout belief in something, no doubt this will play with your mind. And I believe that, especially with Frank, Dr. Salisbury, that was a challenge for him to kind of deal with both of the two. How does religion play into what's taking place in this high strangeness? I encourage you to read that book, and then also Dr. Salisbury has some great reports out there that you can download online. Uinta Basin has always made news, just here and there, and this is before all of the Skinwalker Ranch things took place. So if you look back, you can see these old historical newspaper articles that I have been collecting. That's back in the 70s. Back when all the cattle mutilations really hit full force, back in the early 70s, in this area there were, and there still are, quite a few cattle mutilations, animal mutilations. It's not just cattle, but I have a witness up there who is a third-generation cattle rancher, and he had, as a child, when he was living up there, and he lived pretty close to Skinwalker Ranch, had his pet pony mutilated. He has lost a lot of livestock, and this is incredibly expensive. And when you're trying to make a living and one of your prized possessions is mutilated, and not only that, you don't have the ability to, who do you turn to? You can't claim this on insurance because insurance won't touch it. So sometimes, from what I understand, the cattle ranchers are disposing of the remains. I mean, it's very troubling. But I have in my possession a report from the Daggett County Sheriff's Office of an incident, a cattle mutilation that took place back the same time, the same week as the October 2nd sightings, mass sightings that I talked about. And in this, it says, the detective involved talks about the mutilation that took place. And of course, it's the typical type thing. The organs were removed, things were cut out with laser-like precision, no blood or fluids left in the animal, and no visible traces of any humans in the area. So it's like these animals were just dropped out of the sky. Oftentimes, when you talk to different ranchers and you hear reports, which Chris O'Brien has done a brilliant job with his cattle mutilations research. You should definitely get Stalking the Herd. It's a great book. But, oftentimes you will see these spheres. So the ranchers will see spheres in the vicinity. This third generation cattle rancher mentioned these amber orange and blue spheres that were seen in the area. So what's the correlation? I don't know. But in this report, this is a great report. If you want to come up and look at it after the break, you'll have to look at it. But it was curious to me, and I've been hot on this trail, but in it, the detective says that they have been speaking with people from the Utah State Veterinary, or the Utah State Vet, and that the Utah State Vet has been taking all of the cattle, the bodies, to Utah State University, where they have been looking into all of this. So one would wonder where that data is going. And I definitely have reached out, being the shy, demure little flower that I am, to the Utah State Vet. And interestingly enough, this new person has acted like they don't know what I'm talking about. But I can be pretty pushy when I want to be, so this will be good. I might have to show up on his doorstep one day. But this is important. It's really curious, and it also mentions Linda Moulton Howe in this report, which I think is interesting. So if you want to come up and read it, definitely read that. But this is still going on, and it's frightening, and it's something that deserves to be studied. I have been in the process of trying to get my hands on as much as I can with regard to Junior Hicks and his archives. I mentioned in the first segment that I have been trying to buy anything I can, like that book, the magazine from 1969 that mentions Utah, and putting it in a place. And my hope is to get all of the Utah files in one place, to get them scanned and archived like Barry Greenwood does, and then to give access to a younger generation of researchers so they can move forward with this, which is what we all really need to see happen. We need to engage the younger generation. And for whatever reason, we're kind of missing the boat on that, I think. So there's Junior again, and then some of the local, coverage, seeing portals. Is there a Bermuda Triangle in Utah? Well, duh, yeah, there is. It's called the Uinta Basin, and it's a trip, let me tell you. Then enter Colin Kelleher and George Knapp. And Robert Bigelow, who is, if you've not heard of Robert Bigelow, is one of the world's largest aerospace tycoons. He was involved with MUFON, which was quite controversial. I happen to believe the more I research and kind of move through different circles, I believe that Robert Bigelow, I'm actually happy that he had data and he was doing something with it. So whatever, I wish we had access to the data. I wish some of us could see that, but he's also funded all of this himself, so good for him. He was on 60 Minutes. Did you guys see 60 Minutes at all? Any of you? Okay, yes. I will tell you what, when I saw that interview, I was elated. This is pivotal. And so go to YouTube, go to, I believe it was CBS, and look at that interview. So here you've got Robert Bigelow, a man who has spent more money than anybody on the planet researching the paranormal and the UFO phenomena, who owned Skinwalker Ranch and employed the best scientists in the world to actively engage whatever this was and to monitor things. Here you have him being interviewed about his work now with what he's doing and trying to get things up. And the reporter, of course, said, and I'm sure he probably had the questions beforehand, what do you think about UFOs? Are they really here? And he said, of course they're here. I've spent more money than anybody on the planet. Yes, they're here. And she says, well, where are they? And he says, they're right under our noses. And for that to be on 60 Minutes, and to be asked by a mainstream reporter, And to have a man that is involved with aerospace and with all of this, for him to say that, that was a really important moment. So.
What does right under our noses mean?
Well, you can take that however you want to. I think it means it's, if we quit looking up, if we quit, we need to look up, but I think if we quit, maybe rushing to say that this is all extraterrestrial, or that we need to look at the secret space program, or we need to go here or there, instead of distracting attention, I think what we need to understand is it is here. It's not, yes, it's up there, but it's here. And so what are we going to do to do field research? What are we going to do to engage this and look right in front of us? So, and that's, I think, kind of been our big fallback. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I will tell you that because it's so exciting. There's so many good things going on, but we just can't be distracted by some of the disinformation that's going on in the field right now. So here you have Colm Kelleher, George Knapp, a wonderful book, and they did. Colm Kelleher is brilliant. I hope I get the chance to meet him someday. And of course, George Knapp is my favorite reporter. He's a groundbreaker and did a great deal of work with regard to Bob Lazar, Area 51, and with Skinwalker Ranch. And he actually was invited onto the ranch by Robert Bigelow and crew, and they made him spend the night out in the bushes in a location that was, had some kind of negative things happening. And all of the things in this book happen, and they don't just happen at the ranch. There are reports of, and this is a picture of the old gates, and this is the Bigelow era. This is before Bigelow, or the new owner, came into possession of Skinwalker Ranch. And a little over a year ago, a new owner, Admantium, bought the ranch. And so here you have, and these are my three favorite people with regard to Utah research. You've got Dave Rosenfeld, Ron Regehr, and Chris O'Brien, who was actually the first person at the Sherman Ranch when they started experiencing all of these terrifying events. And so Chris was on the phone with Mr. Sherman when he was saying, there are these orbs, they're chasing my dogs. They were terrified, I've got to go. And then they found by a huge tree out in the backyard, they found the dogs reduced to a puddle of goo. So Chris O'Brien, this is frightening, and it's real. This is real. This happened. So Chris O'Brien was actually on the phone and has a lot of great information, which he's been a guest. All three of these men have been guests on my radio show, UFO Classified, and you can go to KCOR and listen to the archives and listen to some of their interviews, because this is really great stuff. This is important. And I'm proud that they all have a Utah connection. Here is a picture of Skinwalker Ranch now. So as we can see, the new owners have been very methodical and take security to the extreme, which is important because so many times there were people that tried to sneak on the property and disrespect that, go party, do different things, which is not only breaking the law, it's disrespectful. And I think and I'm just going to speak for somebody who owns a business, owns property, there's a liability there. So if you're going into the unknown zone and there are creatures jumping out of portals and animals who are being mutilated and reduced to pieces of, fur and goo, you can't have people just coming onto your property for a good time. So I think it's a multi-layered thing here, but from my understanding, the new owner is very interested in getting good research done. And hopefully that research will be available to the public, and then we can look at that and combine it with places like the Yakima Indian Reservation, where there have been similar types of sightings. We can look at it with Brown Mountain, Marfa, Texas. There are multiple hotspots all over the world that have similar types of sightings. So how do we get the studies from each of these areas together and then figure out what we're dealing with? I don't know, it's curious. But we're going to do it. So there I am. Well, we just got to go back to that one. This is my big moment, standing at the at the gate of Skinwalker. So you can see how incredibly large the gate is, and in my mind, I'm just thinking, what lies beyond there? And do I need to go back and bathe in holy water, or what do I do? How do I approach this? It's really... Well, no, no. With my luck, it would probably not work out for me, and it might be a little awkward. Plus, then, what? Yeah, there you would think, but no, Plus, I have to be on the up and up. But this is it's amazing. So stuff is still taking place. George Knapp, I was on Coast to Coast a while ago, and George Knapp was mentioning the fact that activity has increased as of late. And it is interesting to note that the Uinta Basin, they have just made a huge discovery, and they are now drilling. We've got one of the largest oil deposits in Northern America now in Vernal. And a Canadian company is in there, and they are doing a lot of drilling. And I have to just throw this out. I wonder if there will be an increase in activity because of what's taking place there. I don't know, but it's interesting to note. So here is a video with my friend Dave Rosenfeld.
I think there's something in the Uinta Basin that's ancient or alien, or both. And I know that Bigelow knows this too. What I think is going on there's some kind of Stargate, some kind of portal. I know the military had some kind of involvement in the past.
Do you think they're still involved there?
I think it's beyond the military thing now. I think they knew of it at one point, but it's in someone else's hands now. I think what it is if it is an ancient Stargate, they're trying to fire it up. And every time they try, weird stuff happens on the surface. Okay? It's almost like they can partially open it or open it for a second, and then things come through or that type of thing. So that's when they, on the surface we're seeing dinosaurs and tropical birds and skies with a different sky, that type of thing going on. I think there's something significant there. I think that's probably why Bigelow lost the rights to the property through eminent domain, is because he could prove something was going on there, and that someone higher than Bigelow wants it. Either wants it or wants control of it.
We've got, it's interesting, and I'm going to talk about a case that I've investigated coming up pretty quickly, but Dave Rosenfeld and Ryan Burns are locals from Utah. They've been in the area, and Ryan Burns actually, again, has been on my radio show. They've both become very good friends of mine, and we communicate all the time about this. And, they have been there in the area, and they have witnessed all of these black vehicles, all these black Suburbans rolling into town. Ryan has a property that's not too far from Skinwalker Ranch, and he has videos of men in suits coming on his property with very strange electronic equipment, measuring for something. So the whole area is just, it's active. Yes, I do believe that the CIA was in the area, if not on Skinwalker Ranch, and doing some research. I think that any of these areas are very intriguing because there is something, a portal that is there. And so, of course, who wouldn't want that technology? But my question is I think that for me, it's not a question, it's a statement. I think that we need to be very concerned about who gets the technology and how we choose to engage whatever this is. So it's quite curious. So when I was state director for MUFON, I got a phone call or a report from a man who was in his early 40s. And he worked out on the oil fields right near the ranch. And he had seen multiple objects hovering over the mountain lines. He'd had experiences. So he was telling me about all of his experiences. And then he said, well, you know what, my parents, my grandparents, my grandma grew up in this area. And there was a time back in the 70s when she was out kind of rock hounding with her family. And she wandered away for a bit, but then they couldn't find her for hours. And when they found her, she was disoriented, but she had radiation burns on her in a pattern. So she went to her doctor, and she had had experiences with UFOs and very odd occurrences. She went to the doctor, and he said you've got radiation burns. What have you been doing? Unfortunately, I tried to find her medical records. I couldn't because the doctor had passed away, and the medical records did not seem to go anywhere. But I decided that this was such an important case because it was the grandson, it was the mother, it was the grandmother, that I needed to get up there and I needed to document their stories. And I'm still in contact with them, and they've had very unique experiences. And I want to play a little bit of my interview with this lovely woman, and I think she's very brave.
That time?
Yeah. He was with us that time.
Her one nephew,
I think,
grandson.
yeah.
And that's Kai.
Mm-hmm. No, Kai's the mom.
Oh,
one
Kai's
grandson is Garrett.
Just
Yeah.
trying to put together the pieces. So was Kai ever? Did you find Kai?
Yeah, we found Kai. Where was Kai? Under the bed or something, wasn't she?
Who?
Kai.
She was. She was down to the end of the bed. She couldn't get in under the bed.
She was hungry, I bet.
And just different, you know, and I don't know. We'd had company apparently, because it was. Kai was scared to death, and it was different.
Yeah, that's interesting. Excuse me.
God bless you.
Take a second and tell you she started having experiences when she was a little child, and she never felt threatened by any of these experiences. But as she became a young woman and as she got married and she would be out in remote areas, she had multiple times when not only she had missing time, but her family had significant amounts of missing time. And in this particular event that she's talking about, she was out with her family, and they remember this large object hovering over their trailer. And then they don't remember much after that. And she was expressing how her grandson was, Grandma, what do we do? What do we do? And she looked at him and just said, we go to bed. And so she didn't know how to process this or what to do to console her grandson, who was quite young at the time. But when they came to, they looked in their fridge, which had just been stocked. They just thought they had come there, and there was mold on the bread. The milk had gone sour. And so they were missing for a considerable amount of time, and this is something that they, what do you do? Where do you go? You live in this small town. This was not something that you talked about. But through her experiences, and this was just one of many, and she was so brave, and I get really teary-eyed when I think about this because, the first day that I interviewed her, she didn't want to have her face shown, and again, she's grown up in this very religious area. She had nobody to talk to, and she would try to talk to her parents, and she said, that she couldn't talk with her dad about it. And, the mom just kind of acknowledged it as best she could, but then she couldn't really talk about it. And she had to learn how to cope with all of these things taking place. And I can't imagine having the gravity of sightings that she's had and not having an outlet to talk about it. I believe, even though I don't have hard, concrete evidence that these things took place, but I sat with her family for 2 days, and I talked to them still, and I believe that they are being very truthful. And I just have to say I get teary-eyed because it takes so much courage people like this to come forward. And I feel a very deep sense of respect, and it's just a really cool thing. So anyway, thank you for, I really hope I wore my waterproof mascara, but chances are I didn't, and you never know when you're going to get emotional on stage. It's interesting, but now I want to talk a little bit about this. I'm going to play a video from her now that I've kind of set this up. She was very ill, and she had an experience, and I would like to throw this out to all of you, especially Craig. I have never heard of this before, and if any of you have heard of a sighting like this or an experience like this and a healing like this, please let me know, because I would love your thoughts. So let's...
I was sick for quite some time before my husband retired. No, quite a few years. And I have osteoarthritis, which it don't show up on the outside, it's on the inside of me. And I was going out Salt Lake and back to have these treatments, and I had to wear a thing around my neck to keep my neck in place for some time. So anyhow, I remember this so well because they would come and they'd be here, and they would be in my bedroom with me. Now, I'm telling you this because I don't know how else. Sometimes I think it's my imagination because I was sick, and sometimes I know that I'm denying it. But they would come and they had a machine that they set up in there. It was a big machine. And I would wake up and that machine would be there and they'd be here and they would work on me. They were different than we are, those people. And they would work on me, and they said my blood was different. And they was testing my blood, and they worked on me for a long time. And finally, I become tired. I was tired. And they said they needed to go and get some rest, and that they'd be back. And they made several trips like this to see me in there. And they were, this machine, this big machine, I must tell you about it. It was they called it the Godhead. Now, why they called it the Godhead, I don't know. I still wonder about it, because it was truly the Godhead. That I know, but I don't know anything about it. But it's always been quite a thing, and things will come up, and I will remember things that we talked about.
So again, I could play, I mean, I've got 2 days of interviews with her, and it was really a wonderful experience to watch as she was so reticent to speak, and then as she became more comfortable, it was a remarkable thing. And at some point in time, I will edit all the interviews and then have them available. I've been very concerned about exposing them to any naughtiness. We know that there are lots of nasty people that like to take after people, and so I'm very protective of them. And like I said, I believe I They are very genuine, and given the types of things that take place in the Uinta Basin, I know that this is something that is not out of the norm for the basin. So we have the Skinwalker, and then I am going to just buzz through this because I want to get to, and this was another case that with radar data, which was really cool, but now I want to tell you my thoughts on how we're going to bring this forward and how we're going to change things. So 50 years from now, we're not going to be in the same place we are today. They're still alive. She still reports on things. She has not had any activity. What happened with the machine? It healed her. So, yeah, that was her thought. And, you know, and again, she felt, as other people do that have these experiences, that whatever this was benevolent and protecting her throughout her life, which was interesting, even though they had some very frightening encounters. But I will keep you updated on that, and from time to time I talk about them on my radio show, and maybe I'll have to have them on sometime. They're lovely human beings. So when I got into this, and as you can probably tell, I kind of grab things and I go for it, and that's the way I live my life, and I think that this is the way I've approached this topic. I was not actively involved in this a decade ago, like some of you who I learned from, but I got into this and I saw that we hadn't really made the kind of progress that we need to make. We're still questioning whether this is a reality. Well, guess what it is? We know that. Let's move on. And for me, I don't have time to argue with the skeptics on Facebook and take that on. And if they're too blind to understand that there is more to life and more to reality, and understand that we're making changes in what we know about our own planet every day, you know, if they're that egocentric, then they can have at it. But we need to engage this, and I've mentioned this a few times during my talk today. We need to engage this before somebody with a really ugly agenda engages this for us. And so I believe that it is vital that we work together as a community, not only with MUFON people, with other people, getting as much input as we can, and understanding that we can, that some of the CE5 protocols, although I'm not going to attach this with Stephen Greer because of some of the sentiment there, these are contact protocols that have been around for much longer. There is a conscious connection, and I encourage each of you who are the diehard researchers to get out and to try it and see what happens. I think it is powerful. I think we need to do field research, and that is exactly what I have been doing. So how many of you have heard of NARCAP? Yes, okay, yay! Okay, NARCAP is a really, in my opinion, one of the most important organizations that has done significant research with regard to commercial and military pilot sightings. The chief scientist is Dr. Richard Haynes, and the executive director is Mr. Ted Rowe, who is a friend of mine, and he is also putting together the International Association of UAP Research, and we will be, I'm the communications director, we will be addressing this and engaging the scientific community and doing some, I believe, some groundbreaking work. I had, after I spoke at UFO Congress in February, I had the pleasure of joining my research partner in Utah, Jeff Cox, and Ted Rowe, and we went to a site in Arizona that we won't disclose the location. It's a very sacred, beautiful site. And we did a 5-day field research study where we had all of our equipment and we were out there. We slept in the middle of the desert and it was really hot and no tents. We were roughing it and I looked really frightful by the time that journey ended. But we had coyotes going through camp and all of these things, which was a trip. But it was not only just stunning, but we believe that we really caught some unusual things. And we're in the process of sending some of these things to different people to get their feedback, to try to learn as much as we can to make sure that what we present is actually something truly valid. But this is a beautiful picture of Ted. Ted had been there before. Professor Erling Strand from Hessdahlen, and Dr. Massimo Teodorani, who is an Italian astrophysicist, and again, an important name for you to remember. He's done significant work for NARCAP and published the combination of all the people in NARCAP, did a report called Project Sphere that talks about spherical objects and the impact on aviation safety. So this is really cool. So we were out here. This is when Ted gets back to this beautiful spot, and he jumped out of the car and just started running, and it was so cool. Jeff and I were just sitting there watching him, because it was like this place was so important to him. He knew what had taken place, and it was again a really wonderful experience for me to be out here. So there we are in the car looking, I don't know what, quite frightening, but we were having a good time. So this is really curious. So the first night we were there, I hiked up to the top of a mesa, and I had a couple different video recorders. I had an audio recorder. I had an infrared camera. We had walkie-talkies, and my research partner, Jeff, was on another mesa. He was 300 feet away from me with night vision and the similar types of equipment. And then Ted was back in a bit. So we all had communication. But this is what I captured and what Jeff captured in two different locations, again, 300 feet away. You know, if you have any ideas, suggestions, I am not saying that this is something anomalous, but I'm saying that this is quite curious. So we'll see. When it comes to my PowerPoints, there's always something like this. That's great. That's why we've got such a great audio-video team back there. Thank you. Woohoo! Okay, so this is my vantage point. And right now I'm up at the top, and it's incredibly dark, but I was trying to get my tripod adjusted. And I noticed only visible through the infrared that there were a series of flashes. And so I radioed Jeff and I said, hey, are you picking this up? And interestingly enough, he was picking up the same type of thing. So there, you've got the flash again. Has anybody seen that before?
Flashes, yes. Something like that. That's not too dissimilar to what we saw up on Mount Adams.
Yeah, so this is from Jeff's location. Again, you've got this sort of some different things, probably bugs, dust going through, but then you've got, and I couldn't find the footage with the bright flashes, but you've got something that is in close proximity to Jeff, and he did see the same flashes, and then we've got some interesting objects down here below, and he was trying to focus on something which I am not sure, but very well could be some sort of anomalous light phenomena. But this was interesting. We both got things. The following night, Ted and I were out camping, and we observed an amber orange sphere. And again, you know, we took video of it. It was curious, and at one point in time, it almost appeared to have some sort of a laser-like focus that seemed to be directed at us. Was this something mundane? We don't know, but we did do extensive mapping of the location and went out during the day to make sure we were identifying, you know, objects, homes, car lights, any potential that we would have. This location was incredibly remote, and there was not a lot of traffic, and the road was washed out on some of these places, making it pretty inhospitable. I mentioned, and this is my common theme, the fact that there are many areas like Skinwalker Ranch, and I encourage each of you, because I would be willing to bet that you've probably got a couple of those in your state where you're seeing recurrent anomalous light phenomena. When I look at places like Marfa, Texas, you know, I turn to James Bunnell, who has done extensive work. He's written a few books. And then over on the right side, there is a video. And if you can get this video, I would encourage you to do that, especially if you're an investigator, because he goes through all of his work and what instrumentation he used to collect data and some of his thoughts. So, you know, we've got in some of these hot spots different ideas, different theories on things. Some people believe, Paul Devereaux believes they're earth lights related to, you know, fault lines, and different people have. Marcia Adams has done extensive research as well, and we all have different ideas about things, but Marfa is important, and he's done incredible work, and please get this video because you can learn a great deal from Marfa. And then we have got, and this book is so expensive and out of print, you've got Dr. Harley Rutledge, who did extensive work in Missouri. And this is important reading too because it all correlates. They're using the same type of equipment, they're collecting data, and this builds upon, one study builds upon another, and we've got good studies out there. And now for Yakima, and Craig and I were both up in this area. We were at Isetti Ranch. I was speaking there. And Isetti Ranch is in Washington State, and this was, it's a beautiful location, and it is we've got a lot of different things going on there, but examining the Earthlight theory is Greg's work, and he has collected countless reports. David Akers has done significant studies in the Yakima Indian Reservation, and so there have been pretty brilliant people who have been engaged in research for a long time that oftentimes go under the radar, like Greg. Greg is incredible because he has, for decades, looked through every publication known to man and collected newspaper clippings and articles about the orange amber spheres, and he has done this in every country. And I will tell you what, the files on this are off the hook. He's sending them to Barry Greenwood, and Barry Greenwood is scanning them and archiving them, and so we will all have access to all of these reports. And we're talking, Australia, Zimbabwe, all of these places, and guess what? It's the same type of thing. There are commonalities. This has been going on for decades, if not longer. So when you look at each of these places, notice the similarities. What we have in these window areas, we have the balls of light, animal mutilations, strange creatures. Something that we don't really hear a lot about is the soil displacement. But at Skinwalker Ranch and in Yakima and in Hessdahlen, they have had different cookie cutter type instances where there has been a section of soil that has very methodically been lifted up, roots still intact, and placed close to or far away from the original cookie cutter hole. Not only that, we've got this soil displacement, and it's hard to find articles on this, but Greg Long and I have been working to do that and get them all in one place so we can look at that. And then you also hear the underground sounds. So this is common in these areas. It most certainly is up at Skinwalker. It is in Yakima. And you have people that will try to, of course, there have been reports, well, it was the Navy testing this here and there and blah, 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 blah. But, again, you've got too many reports where that is not the case. And so we have to look at those and figure out, is there perhaps something underground that is living there? What is going on? And you also have the paranormal disturbances. So there are all sorts of things going on in these window areas. And it is important, again, not just to focus on the UFO side of things, but to make sure that you're getting data and you're looking in places. When I do my research, I do a lot of research not looking at the UFO data. I'm looking in other areas so I can find out more, and you really do find out a great deal. It's a lot of fun. So I love it. And look who it is. It's my friend Craig. Yes, so here we are. We were up at Isetti Ranch, and we had a great time there. We were at Gilliland Ranch. It was lovely. They were wonderful. But this is an area, this whole valley, where you get lots of these different sightings. And we sat out there every night in the field, and we had equipment, and we watched, and we saw things. And some things we were able to, with this lovely team of people, debunk or explain. There are, when you're looking at the mountain there, which you can see in the background, it is obvious that there are a lot of hikers that are going up and down the mountain, and so we had to rule out some of these mundane things. We went up, and both of us talked to different hikers, and they do climbs during the evening so they can get up there and watch the sunrise. And in some of the photos I have, you can very clearly see the string of hikers going up there, but there were things that we captured that can't be explained. And it was funny because Craig, was he had kind of a running joke, and it was. I think people were a little concerned. Who is this debunker? It was really funny. But he would say, "Oh, look at those hikers! Look at those hikers!" Or whatever. We had this funny joke. But he, I don't think the people there understood that he was kind of making a joke. I did, because I know Craig, and it was funny. But then Craig had an experience, and I think maybe I'll have to get him up here when I'm done with my talk so he can explain what he saw. But it was something anomalous, something that can't be explained. There was also, when we were here, at the base of Mount Adams, there was also that weekend a fellow who was looking through his binoculars and saw an interesting feature in the mountain, and some have dubbed it the garage door. And I think that the sentiment was this thing appeared that weekend. And
I'm not sure that's accurate.
I don't think that's accurate at all. Yeah, I think but we went up there. Craig hiked up as close as he and those fellows I was just showing you, as close as they could to the area. I also have somebody who lives in the area who does a great deal of hiking, and right now, our belief is that is obviously natural. So, but not all of our belief, but some. Yeah. So anyway, that was curious, but that definitely made the rounds on the internet. So who knows? But there is a lot of really interesting stuff in this location. And so it was fun to go up there. And this is one of those things. Here you've got the string of hikers going up the mountain. And then here you've got something that I'm still trying to explain. There were kind of switchback mountains going up there to the location, kind of the base camp for hikers. But for what we saw and videotaped, I don't think that explaining this away as a car light right now is the option I'm going to jump to. I think there was something interesting. Again, I'll hopefully have those videos analyzed and post them for you. But then this is my friend. I want to tell you about Charles Lamoureux, who, and I mentioned him earlier. He is a wonderful human being, and he's also brilliant with night vision. He has captured some incredible things. He lives up in Canada. And if you want to know about night vision or how to put together a really cool unit to study this, Charles Lamoureux is your man, so find him on Facebook. Don't tell him I said that. Just kidding. Okay, so on that note, that's Charles. And then, okay, here we go, Hessdahlen, Norway. So this is my baby, and I am proud to say that in 1 month, I will be in Norway, and I will be with Professor Erling Strand and his team of scientists and researchers from Oxford University. When we talk about not having evidence, solid, hard, tangible scientific evidence, we have to just say, yeah, we do, and it's here at Hessdahlen. So how many of you have heard of Hessdahlen? Praise the Lord. Okay, we've got some hands. This right here is the most important place on the planet. This is the most important study that we have ever done with regard to this. And so I want you to go learn as much as you can about it. There is a wonderful video that I've watched, I think, 1 million times. And it is called The Portal. You can find it on YouTube. It's only 45 minutes, but it interviews Erling and the people that were involved here, David Akers, these brilliant people. And I believe that there's a little film clip with Hynek, who visited Hessdahlen as well. So back 30 plus years ago in this little sleepy village in Norway, the townspeople were basically besieged with these flying objects. They were seeing things up close and personal, and they were frightened, concerned. So news reports went out about this, and the townspeople were made fun of, and it was hard for them. But Erling Strand and his brilliant team of researchers from the university came in and did a 2-week field study. They were able to determine that this was an area that needed to be fully studied. And decades later, they are still there and have an observatory that has been set up where different universities from all over the world go, where they collect real-time data, and they actually have live cams. So you can go to projecthessdahlen.org to see this, to look at the gravity of their work. They have done important things, and I cannot wait to get over there and to learn from them. The most impressive thing to me, though, is the fact that they take, twice a year, they take kids, they take college students that are in the engineering school, and they bring them out there and they teach them how to use instrumentation to study something anomalous. I don't know anywhere in the world where they do this. And to me, when we think about engaging a younger generation, this is how we have to do it. We can make this about science, and we can bridge those gaps, and we can, and I get so excited now, see, I'm just going to, I don't know, burst out of my seams, but I get so excited because this is where it's at. This is important. We have to engage younger people. This is Erling. So I'm so excited to learn from him, like I said. This is some of the anomalous light phenomena that is seen, that has been seen. They also have a vast archive of photos and videos. And so I encourage you to go to projecthessdahlen.org again. And here's the blue spiral that was seen. As of a week and a half ago, they had another sighting. The video is available on the website. But a very curious part to all of this is the fact that after 30 years of collecting data, they have identified different types of light phenomena that appears to behave intelligently, or is intelligently controlled, it responds. So that's huge. And I have to say, for somebody like Erling Strand and his team of scientists 30 years ago to go about this and to do it with enough fortitude and enough intelligence to learn how to engage other people and to get this taken seriously, that's a big, big step. And they deserve a lot of gratitude. I really encourage all of you to learn about this. And I also want to say that, you know, the data that they have captured, the spectral data, they have determined, and Erling was talking about this at the UFO Congress, that scandium, which is a chemical element, was present, which is very curious. And again, there is a report I will be posting that Erling shared about this. So this is something we can learn when you get out into the field, take some diffraction grading, and you know, use some of these tools, and then we'll put all of our resources together and all of the data and hopefully move forward. So there's Erling up there installing cameras. And this is something, I'll just let you read that Erling said back in 1985. So this is awesome. But I hope, and I don't know, I think I could go on all day, but I won't do that to you. I want you to ask me some questions. But again, I want to just say that, and here, just 1 second, because I've got one more thing I have to say. When we move forward and we want to engage a younger generation, we have to be willing to look at ourselves, and we have to be willing to look and see why we have failed getting this information out. And I believe because we've had no ethical or professional standards in the field of ufology, we have failed. Because we have all of this infighting, and because we have disinformation that is running rampant, we have failed, and we have been kind of pushed off course. But I know now that I will do everything in my power to give you good information, that I will work with people like all of you to make sure we are being steered in the right direction, and that we are making change, that we are being progressive, and that we are addressing this and getting this out on a global scale. This is what I want to do, and I know that we'll all do this together, so I want to thank you. This is exciting. So learn about Hessdahlen and Marfa and everything, and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and we'd like to get the questions on the mic. You had a question here?
Yes. Have you studied anything like what Art Bell described as Mel's Hole? Because it seems like Mel's Hole is out in that neighborhood. Now, if you don't know what Mel's Hole is, it's a bottomless pit that some guy named Mel discovered. And they started playing with it, and they found out it had some very unique physical properties. And so they dropped a sheep down there on the rope. And discovered that it was some sort of teleportation device for extraterrestrials, because when they heard the scream and brought the sheep back up, it had an alien in its stomach or something crazy like that. And
Whoa.
After that, they covered up the hole and they never talked about it again. But I was wondering, that seems like it was out in the vicinity of Skywalker Ranch or somewhere.
Ranch. I
Skinwalker.
will definitely not be visiting that place, I can tell you.
No,
that's interesting. I'll have to look it up.
I was reminded of it by those rays that were coming out of the Air Force Base. On those experiments, because that could have been somebody being teleported from here to there.
I know, you don't know, and I'll have to look that up, but thank you for bringing that up. There's so many mysteries in Utah, I mean, all around us. It's incredible.
Cool, we got another question right over here. Hang on.
Hi there. When the woman was healed, did she describe the beings? I heard her say something about being humanoid. Did they look like humans, or were they grays, or what?
You know what? They were actually wearing outfits. They were wearing helmets. They were a little bit shorter stature, very spindly. They were wearing maroon suits. So it was quite interesting to me. And again, I've not heard of beings in maroon suits. And so if anybody has anything, please help me out. That's good.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
You brought up strontium and using a diffraction grating to see that. I was wondering if you used any other spectrum analyzers, like a radio spectrum analyzer, to see.
You know what they do over in Hessdahlen, and I believe that James Brunel used that as well. And I think that for me and for most of us, it's all about the funding. How do we get, I would love to, and this was something when I was working with MUFON headquarters, I kept saying, or encouraging Jan Harzan to do, is we need to have a full-time fundraiser in MUFON, I thought at the time, so we could afford to get equipment out to each chapter, because that was one thing that I kept asking people involved in MUFON, what equipment do I need? I'm having major sightings. What do I need? And I could never even get a list together. I think they're working on that now, but I also think it would be great, and what I would like to do is get sponsored, so different companies are letting me use their equipment, and I think that would behoove MUFON as well to write a proposal and approach different night vision optics companies and different manufacturers, so we could get that equipment out there and then have some cohesiveness in the data that we're capturing.
Yeah, you may find some interesting stuff with spectrum analyzers. Sweep spectrum analyzers can find parasites in the body, among other things.
Oh, we're going to have to talk after.
One quick question. Do you have any incidents in the St. George, Utah area?
I do have some interesting incidents in St. George. In fact, I had a woman back when I was state director who contacted me, and she had a sighting, and she sent me several videos of the amber orange spheres, but she had a sighting down there, and it was near a community. It was over a community. It was at night, and she witnessed this orb that was just hovering, but there was a helicopter that was in close proximity, kind of watching what had happened, and she said that this object moved so quick, and then the helicopter would follow, and then the object seemed to kind of fold into itself and disappear. And she could never figure out, and I tried to figure out where the helicopter was coming from, and there was nothing at the airport at that time that would have suggested it was a commercial kind of a helicopter. I mean, it was interesting. So we do get reports. Again, we need to, and what we're trying to do with our team in Utah is engage people in these remote locations, these rural areas, and hopefully they know that they've got a good person or people to share sightings reports with. And I hope that at some point in time, MUFON will share data with other people so we can work together.
With all this activity of UFOs is there any evidence of what they're doing here and what they want to do? Is there any plans? I'm sure there's somebody speculating about some of this stuff, even though the contactees should have some semblance of an idea. Are they just researching? Is there good, bad ones? Is there evil ones? Is there...
I think that's such a great question, and that's a question, I think there's some nights I go to bed and I'm scared out of my freaking mind. because I learn things and I think, maybe I don't want to know this. I mean, yeah, I believe with the experiences, the personal experiences I've had, that this has been a positive thing. I feel, and I didn't really go into some of the personal settings I've had, but I've never felt threatened. But there are people who are very threatened. There are people that are burned severely. There are people that are mentally scarred. And so you've got the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think that it's right now, and I can't stress this enough, it's important for us to look at all of the facts and to not believe everything we're being fed by people who are prominent in this field, because there is, I believe, the truth probably lies somewhere in between. I think there's benevolent, malevolent, but I think it's a combination of everything. And I don't necessarily want to jump on the demonic agenda. So I think we need to be very cognizant and careful.
Hi. Hi. I have a question for you. Have you had any Men in Black encounters in Utah?
You know what? We've had Men in Black encounters in Utah. I am really happy I've not seen Men in Black, however. But, you know, I have, since we live close to Dugway, and I have a friend, Dave Rosenfeld, who you saw in the videos. I mean, he has definitely had some interesting experiences. I think Ryan Burns on his property that is by Skinwalker Ranch, the people that he saw, you could maybe classify as Men in Black. So, yeah. Interesting stuff.
There are a lot of stories about people that just disappear in forest and, I mean, like parks in America. And like some people, like families are walking and then somebody just disappears literally into air. And there was one story had a good ending. This kid was like 3 or 4. He disappeared and he was found like 20 miles away, like 2 hours later by somebody. Do you think that's related to this stuff, or do you think it's different?
Oh, boy. I think it very well could be. I think Missing 411 is a great book by David Paulides, and he's done great work with this. You certainly, when you talk to some of the people that work in the National Forestry, you know, you hear all sorts of things. And, in fact, there's a really great interview. I'm trying to remember what it was on. It's available on YouTube, but it was talking with different people who are out there in these remote locations and have had experiences like this or have heard reports, you know. So it's all curious. Yeah, I do think it could be related. I think we need to study it, and I think we need people who are each, you know, maybe that could be your job.
And what do you make of the...
You go out there and you look for all those reports, and then you come back to us, and then we'll try to figure it out.
All right, I'll hold you to that.
Okay, sweet. I'm game.
And what do you think about the black-eyed children?
Well, they're certainly creepy, aren't they? I think Nick Redfern was on my, oh my gosh, he was on my show a while ago, and I think the world of Nick, he's a brilliant researcher, and it's just tons of fun. But he talked about the black-eyed children, and I don't know as much about them as I should, but they definitely are freaky. I don't think there are a lot of reports of the black-eyed children. I don't know how verifiable they are, but Nick would be a great person to ask. The whole eye. Yeah, it's definitely not something I'd want to encounter in a dark alley, but... Well, and you know, Chris Carter and that crew did a great deal of research, and some of the stuff that they portray in the X-Files is based in reality, yeah. Which is good, because I happen to think David Duchovny is very handsome. That's all I'm saying. And William Shatner, but that's another story.
With regard to the Hessdahlen lights, the last time I read about those was in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, maybe 6 or 8 years ago. And at that time, it seemed that they were leaning toward explaining them as the piezoelectric effect, which is the fault lines are rubbing against each other and causing electricity, and these manifest as lights. Is that still out there, or have they gotten beyond that?
Oh, I'm sure that's still out there. Some people, Persinger, I think, you know, that was a big thing. I think that, you know, the question I would ask, and I think some people that research this, is there are fault lines all over, but yet you don't have this type of activity. So I don't know. It's all interesting, but I'll let you know. I'll give you a report when I get back from Hessdahlen.
So when are you next going to be on TV?
Oh Lord, I think that they just we're doing a season 2, and for
What do you watch much on?
you know, I watched Bob Ross painting happy clouds because I have to get away from the UFO stuff. I think so. I just little Bob Ross, he makes everybody happy. But I am so busy researching and reading, and the biggest way that I spend my time is talking on the phone to other people, so I don't watch TV that much. And if I do, I have to say it's either Star Trek, because I like Shatner, or it's the X-Files, you know? So those are my, that's what I watch. But I think...
You're actually on TV. What is the name of the program?
It's called UFOs, The Lost Evidence. And we are doing a season 2, and then we've got some other things that are hopefully on the frontier, and so I'll keep you posted. But go to UFOclassified.com, and that will have all my updates. Pardon? Where is it filmed? It's filmed in Austin, Texas, which is it's fun. That's such a beautiful city. But I had to go in there for the series and record 7 episodes in 12 hours. And so sitting in a chair and being fresh for 12 hours, it was challenging. So I'm glad you like it, though.
Well, on a more positive note, somebody was mentioning, about these aliens, what they're like and what they're all about. Joanne and I visited her sister down in Nebraska here some years ago, and I had read about a Herbert Schirmer who had an encounter with an alien. And he was the youngest sheriff in the nation at the time. And he was driving down, I think it was Highway 15 in rural Nebraska, and he saw some lights up ahead at an intersection. And so, he thought it was some kind of a crash. So he sped over there, and right when he got not too far away from it, he saw a UFO lift off and fly off a short distance away, and it happened to go to a place where you couldn't see it. He saw it go down, but you couldn't see it from the roadway. It was up on a hill, right? So anyway, we decided to go down there and see if we could find this location. And as we're driving along, I see a guy out in the field, and he's out about a block, and he was walking to a Quonset hut. And I said to Joanne and her sister, I says, I've got to pull over and see if this guy might know where that place is. So I go over there and introduce myself. And I said, did you know Herbert Schirmer? And he said, he was my very best friend. He was my very best friend.
Wow.
He said he was a great, great, great human being, and he'd like to see him again. He'd like to be visiting with him. And anyway, I said, well, there's this report in this book where he said that he somehow was drawn to go up in his squad car and drive up the side of that hill and see that where that object landed, to see what it really was. And he did that. And he said, it's right over there. This guy that I'm visiting with, he says, it's right over there. You can't see it very well, but you drive over there and you're going to see a little roadway that comes up, for the farmers, and just follow that up to the top. And so I went up there, and you could see that no place around there could see where that craft went down. Herbert Schirmer went up there, and as he was looking at it, he saw an entity climb out of the UFO. Okay? And he walked over to this squad car. And Herbert Schirmer had his window down, and he was reaching for his gun. And the entity said to him, you wouldn't harm me, would you? And Herbert thought for just a second, and he said, no, I would not do that. The entity said, would you like to see the craft? And he said, yes, I would. Gets out of his patrol car, goes over there, and he found this ladder, and the entity said, follow me. So he goes up there, and he said that the metal was very, very cold, right? And that when he went inside, all of a sudden, the inside of the craft was quite large. It didn't look like it was that way. And this is all this high strangeness of things that, maybe these entities have a way of changing, molecular dimension.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Right. Absolutely.
So that you might be in a very small craft, but you might really be in a very big space. And so he showed him the whole craft, and at the very end, to make the story short, he said, someday you will see the universe. Pretty nice story.
You know what? And I have to just say that it is, first of all, really, really cool that you all got out there and did that. And I encourage all of you to do that because you never know who you're going to run into. And take a video camera, get your cell phone, record these things, and share them. Because we need to get all of these precious, all this information out there. And that's really cool. Good for you. Thank you.
Back to Utah, are you also collecting Bigfoot sightings in your research?
I have, a part of my team is a cryptozoologist, and he also works for the police department. He is a brilliant scientist. He's written many papers, and he is kind of covering that area. Then I've also got a team that does paranormal research, and then Jeff Cox and I do all the UFO research, and then we kind of pull forces, but Bruce Champagne is the cryptozoologist who is incredible, and I'm happy to say that he's out there speaking, which he should be, because he's done scientific, really great research.
The Herbert Schummer case, which Tom told us about, was a very important case and very well known back when it happened. And the Colorado project, which was funded by the Air Force to study UFOs, took a look at this case also.
Wow.
So
that's so neat.
The Condon report.
You have to.
Yes.
You should please videotape yourself telling that story and send it to me, and I'll get it out there. That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you. I think that's. Oh.